I need to emphasize as well that I think the church is governed by congregation as well on that. Matthew 18:17 says, if they still refuse to listen in cases of church discipline, it says, tell it to the church, the congregation in general, not just elders. And they refuse to listen to even the church. Treat them as a church, as you would a pagan or tax collector. So really, the elders dominate over the church.
Not quite. Not,
No.
Though there are some, the elders would rule. I heard one guy. I mean, he said it humorously, but he said, in a family, you don't let the kids make the decisions. That's what the parents are there for. And he's like, so God made the elders the parents, and they're watching out. And because the kids would run with scissors and this kind of stuff. And it's funny, but that text right there goes up against pushes against that kind of hard. So.
Now, how can parents teach respect and submission to church leadership in an anti-authoritarian age?
In some ways, I think you need to take a step back from the church context and just help kids, young people, see that the parents themselves have to submit to authority, to governments, bosses, and to church leaders. And so just seeing, listen, we're all under authority. We were having that conversation this morning at the breakfast table, too. I don't even remember how it came up. Oh, it was with the thing about, dads being the head of the family and stuff. But, even the president of the United States, he's got the most, he's the head one in charge in America. He can't just do whatever he wants. Now, we didn't get into executive orders and stuff like that. But still, the Constitution does limit and, can't just – he has to get Congress to work with him and things like that. And so just helping them see that we are under authority and then connecting that, and that it's a gift from God. And I think too, don't speak badly of pastors and church leaders in front of kids. Don't complain about the sermon or pastor so-and-so did this. Speak well of them in front of the kids, and because they will learn to, whether it's a young child or that's a teenager, that they will learn to take on the attitude that you take towards authority.
Yeah, that's awesome. The only thing I think I'd add to that is one practical thing is, and I say this knowing it's a little selfish because I like to eat free food, but I think parents can help their children follow the leadership of their pastors through getting to know their pastors together as a family. Having the pastor and his family in the home over for dinner and see that way the children, you see them as real people, not, as just these far off, smug leaders in that kind of way. And I think that is a really helpful way to do it, especially if you make bacon and invite me over. I'm all on board for that.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Have Pastor Tony over for some bacon and pumpkin pie or something.
I am on board, my friend. I am on board. Now, how do we teach children and youth about the role of a pastor and the ministry of the Word?
I think this is something that almost week to week. Now I don't know that you do this every week, but it can be. You have the opportunity for it, but that a lot can be done through application. As you're teaching through whatever, you can look and think about, okay, how does this apply to that particular aspect about pastors and the ministry of the Word, how important the ministry of the Word is. I think too, you're lifting up the Word, and that's you were talking about the word for deacon, meaning servant. There's places in the New Testament where it refers to pastors as deacons of the Word. And so they are a servant of the Word. And so just making the Bible central, teach from the actual Bible, and even use a physical copy, have it visible, just for kids that are pre-literate and they're just seeing, this comes from that book. We really talk about that a lot.
Not an invisible copy, like the visible Word, like the invisible church.
Right, there you go. And make comments regularly too about what the Bible is and what it does as you teach it, and that talking, fitting what pastors do in there with it, but that the pastors have been given the role of teaching it, but all of us are to be in the Word, and we need to hear the Word, and so. Just even as you start teaching, and I remember this is the Holy Spirit breathed these things out for us. He gave us exactly what He wanted to be written, and so He gave it to us for encouragement, for hope, endurance. Romans 15:4, I believe it is. But just regularly pointing out to them how central the Word is. That's how that I've tried to go about it. But
yeah, that's good.
Well, I mean, what have you? Because you've ministered, I guess. You're a little bit broader than I am. So how do you go about that?
Yeah, I think we said the pastoral epistles. This one, I mean, very overt one, and maybe that seems obvious, but I think the pastoral epistles are one key way that we ignore it with families. It's not often that we study First Timothy in family worship, right? Or that we study it with youth group or children's ministry. But I think it's really helpful because it really illuminates that kind of thing. But also, I think another thing, an image that we can use with children and youth that kind of helps them understand the role of the pastor. There's a term my pastor in Louisville, Ben Larimore, a really great godly man, godly pastor. He would often describe a pastor as a mailman. That some people he'd think the pastor is basically a wise man, a religious guru. But he said, instead of the job of the pastor is to be a mailman, he just gives what he's given. He taught that you would fire a mailman if he threw away the mail that he was given to give you, and instead decided what you deserve, what he thinks you should hear today. You should rightfully fire that mailman. You should fire a pastor if he does that same kind of thing. And I think portray the pastor as that. So to portray the pastor as his job is to, maybe it's a little boring to hear these exegetical details in 2 Chronicles, but that's his job. His job is to give what God has given us in the Word and to show how it illuminates and relates to our life. So yeah, I think
that's a good helpful analogy that even little kids can get.
And Ben, how can we magnify with children and youth the less glamorous biblical leadership role? I mean, we've talked some about the role of elders, but and it can be seen as kind of a sexy, if you will, role, the pastor, the glamorous role of being a pastor, a missionary. But nobody feels that way about a deacon or a Sunday school director or a church custodian. How can we magnify those roles that Jesus does magnify?
I think you want to draw out some of what they do and even tell stories if you know some about how someone has benefited the church and, highlight that for them. Send them a card or a gift as a family, or if it's a Sunday school class or something like that. Pray for them by name. I know something that our Wednesday night program that it implements is getting to know different people in the church, whether they're in an official role or they're just a member of the church. And it comes from when we interviewed her, Connie Dever, with the Praise Factory curriculum, and they have something on a very important prayer person. And so it's kind of a fun – it's a game. And so I've given out these sheets where the people fill out stuff that would be of interest to kids, like their favorite food and their favorite animal and hair and eye color and stuff like this. But then it also asks them what you do during the week and how do you serve the church? How can we pray for you? And you're supposed to list several things. And so the kids try to play a game to figure out who the person is, and then they pray for them. And so it's a neat way for the kids to get exposed to whether it's the sits at the front desk, answers the phone, or it's someone who, like you said, it's someone doing the less glamorous custodial work, or whatever the case may be, and just highlighting that as a person that we can love and that we can take to God's throne of grace. And so I really love that.
Yeah, that's awesome. The only thing I'll add to that is I think we need to teach, whether children and youth, the biblical principle that the last will be first and the first will be last. And that, it could be the case in heaven that some of the more important, more honored figures in heaven be faithful deacons that were happy to take care of that some poopy diaper trash, then he glorifies and lifts up pastors that have no interest in doing that kind of deeds. And I think that principle of how God's upside down kingdom work, I think, helps us understand that and helps us see the value that, it's not just the deacons do the work so the elders don't have to, although in some sense that is true. But they do what is vital and clearly important that the church can function without, just like an elder does. Now, how can churches' youth and children's ministry explain ecclesiology in general?
Well, first off, I wouldn't use that word, at least for kids, probably. But I think you do teach them about it, and again, I think you teach on it specifically. Again, application plays in as well. Probably a lot of churches are going to be using some form of curriculum, but not all. Some, they go week to week, or they make their own stuff as they go. I would encourage folks not to just haphazardly get whatever offline, and it's really there's no tie together from one week to the next. That's where a curriculum can be helpful, and there are free curricula out there, and so that can help you do that. But if you're able, get a curriculum that does address it in through the course of the teaching. And so, and you can see that especially in the New Testament, the applications and things like that are not just individual. I mean, but there's a number of letters written to churches. And so just the New Testament does make a big deal about it. So we have to ask, why shouldn't we do the same? And so you just make it a point. This is something that we need to discuss. If the New Testament talks so much about it, and Jesus loved his church and laid his life down for it, then we need to help our young people who are coming up, and they are becoming part of the church as well, to know what it is to be the church and how to do that faithfully. So I guess, I didn't give you awesome specifics there, but I don't know. What do you think?
So my perspective on how we can teach as ecclesiology, I agree. We don't use that term at all. It would not be wise to start off a class called Ecclesiology 101 with your preschoolers. But I think a class along the lines of Ecclesiology 101, what is the Church 101 or something like that, might be legitimately a helpful study in children and youth ministry. Going through youth, what is the church? One thing we're going to do in the winter is we're going to study systematic theology together, kind of like going through Wayne Grudem's systematic theology with the youth group, and we're going to have a week just dedicated to understand what the church is. But also, one very relevant resource, Sojourn Community Church has produced a little book called What is the Church? For children, and I think that's a really helpful resource. They've kind of got a accompanying book that our home is the little church or something like that. But the book that I think would help to teach young children a biblical ecclesiology is called What is the Church? And again, that's made by Sojourn Community Church.
Those are helpful ideas.
Buy it. So. Now, what can parents and next generation volunteers do to raise up healthy future church leaders?
Well, first of all, pray for God to do the work, but then act in that faith as you go, because that's what prayer is. I mean, it's faith in God, or it should be. It's saying we're weak and you're strong, and so Lord, please do this. But then it's putting feet to that, like Lord, work through these actions. And so I think just talking about the possibility that God would enable some of the kids, the young people that you're serving, or your own children, that he would might enable them to serve his people that way in the future. And so it lays the groundwork to help them even aspire to that kind of work, whether it's vocational or not. And, we tend to glamorize certain professions in our society, and even, Christians, whether it's a doctor or an athlete or singer, this kind of thing, but prioritize that work of serving God's people and showing that is a worthy thing to set your sights on. But at the same time, you don't want to, at the time of the Reformation, they were kind of chipping away at the notion of like this two-tier caste you get the holy people and then the rest of us. You don't want to give that impression, but at the same time, you do want to show that is an honorable thing. And yeah,